Easy. So my first question is, how did you get here? And I don't know where you are. I don't know whether you took the bus with the mask on. I don't know whether you walked, or I don't know whether you just moved from your bedroom to the couch if you're still working at home. But it's actually not what I'm wondering. Not how did you get here today to this amazing conference, but how did you get to where you are in your role today? And we all have our amazing journeys for how we did that. And we're all quite technical. And so we have our technical journeys that actually really differentiate us. And so I think for many of you, if you're of my generation or older, the way that you got here is by tinkering. How many of you remember pulling apart something when you were a kid and looking at what was inside? For me, it was the toaster. I'm sure you all have a story of something that you opened up that you weren't supposed to and didn't quite know how to put it back together. But this was the fundamentals of our knowledge in the tech space. The way to figure out how technology works and maybe what's coming is by opening things up and looking at what's inside them. And I started with a toaster and I ended with smartphones and laptops, and pretty much everything I ever opened got destroyed, but it didn't matter because I was learning in the process. And so if you were one of these kids who was always tinkering, and it's a lot of us in the tech space, then the lessons that you were learning in doing that are typically not the ones that you learn at school. They're typically not subject-based, they're not assessed. You don't get an exam into how to pull apart a toaster, but they really help you to understand how things work and how to be a creator. Now, if you have kids of your own right now, they're probably all harassing you because they want their own device. But let's have a think of their childhood. I don't know if you've noticed, but screws have gone extinct. Kids these days can't do what we did. They can't open things up and look inside. And there's a fundamental now lack of knowledge that we innately have in our generation because we just know how things work. To kids who just have always accepted that a device or something electrical just pretty much works by magic, a lot of them say. And this fundamental gap actually is really important. Now, I used to teach welding as an engineering professor, and I love teaching welding. For anybody who's ever taught welding before, you know it's so great. As soon as you put the safety gear on your students and you put on the torch, everybody gets really excited. You feel the heat, you hear the sound. Welding is incredible. The challenge with welding, though, is it's a really expensive subject to teach. You need labs, you need health and safety, and there's a lot of risks involved. And this is where the future of technology is really interesting, because I have been replaced by technology. I don't know if you've seen it, but you can now learn welding through augmented reality. And so what you would do is you put on an augmented reality headset. This is the HoloLens, but there are many different types of headsets. And augmented reality headsets sort of mix both the real world and an imaginary world into one space. So when I teach welding, I typically can't critique the weld of a student until they've finished. And then I'll say, well, that wasn't good enough, and here's what you would do next time. The advantage of augmented reality welding is that real time you're getting instruction on how to put the temperature up, when to move to the next spot, and it's real time that you couldn't get from a human. And here's an example of this. We'll just press play. Okay. So this is augmented reality welding. They've weighted the handle so it feels like a torch. And this is what you're looking through the visor at. And it's not actually real, but it doesn't matter because you feel like it's real, it sounds like it's real. And I didn't have to have an expensive lab. I can mail this to your house. You can do it while you're still locked down at home. And this is really the future of sort of the technical learning that I think is really exciting. Also, if you say to your kids, have you read a book today? We'll probably think of old people's books the way that we read them. We are now old people. If you look at augmented reality in books, it's really changed. So here is a science textbook. This is probably what you grew up with. Technology has changed books into a way that actually with augmented reality, books come to life. So here is a book. It's a physics book. And don't you wish that your book did this? So what's happening here is you hold your phone up to the book, it's got a little code in it, and you can now, the objects that were just a 2D image in your book, now you can come to life, you can walk around them, you get a real sense of how to learn in a very different way. And so technology is moving really quickly in education, and I think it's quite exciting. So what are the skills we want to teach our students? I think we need to move to competency-based learning and collaboration. We're all going to be specialists for short periods of time now, and then technology is going to move on. And so actually making sure that we're not just learning subjects and regurgitating information in exams, but actually having a malleable skill set and the ability to get micro credentials and learn very quickly in lots of different subsets, I think is the future of learning.
And so, look, why do we start with this? Why do we start a presentation on building tomorrow's workforce today with this? Because fundamentally, the way that young people learn has changed, and the learning experience through formal education, through tinkering at home, through the emergence of online learning at home has transformed so profoundly that we find ourselves working with partners all over the world to help them develop their future workforces and have strategies in place that mean that as the information domain emerges, then there's a workforce there actually ready to step into those critical roles and drive the technology forward and drive the capability forward. I love it when technology comes together. So look, Michelle and I are the founders of a company called Nanogirl Labs. We're Auckland based, but we have staff all over the world, Vancouver, London, all over New Zealand. And we say we inspire, educate, and empower. But fundamentally, we exist to try and transform the way that learning happens and to support that future workforce development, to empower and enable everybody everywhere to have a meaningful relationship with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Our business sits right at the intersection of entertainment, education, technology, and impact. And I'm going to talk a little bit to each of those through the presentation, and we're going to give you a bit of a flavor of the sorts of things that we get up to as we try to turn this idea of how you learn on its head and how we invite a broader and more diverse cohort of people to take part in the technical industries so critical to the information domain. Igniting the change maker is what we do. At Nanogirl Labs, we are transforming the way learning happens. Michelle, this is a photo of real significance to you.
So my engineering background started here. In this photo somewhere is my dad. This is based in Hong Kong. This is a Wessex. So I grew up doing my homework on Wessex because my dad was an avionics engineer. And I think these fundamental things that surround our kids and their experiences really gives them confidence to shape their future. And so this longevity has meant that I now have this incredible relationship with both NZDF, but specifically with the Royal New Zealand Air Force. And one of the programs that we do with Squadron Leader Magdalenos is this Schools to Skies program. And this is life-changing. We've been doing this for a few years now. It's that hands-on learning, it's that sense of peril and adventure that really stimulates young people to think not only is the military for me, but I can do a technical subject within the military, which schools don't tend to promote. So Schools to Sky is great. We basically get girls from all around the country who are year 12, and we get them to build things. They learn to weld, they go, they do a flight path, they go up in a Hercules. It's pretty fun. But also they talk about the bonding they have between themselves of teamwork, collaboration, and real life skills. And this we have seen literally changes their lives. And so we're moving that through now from the Air Force. We now have Schools to Seas, which we're working on, which will be released very soon, which is a similar project, but for the Navy. And this is where we get the students to build their own basically underwater robot submarine to go solve a problem and find out who the baddie is, I think.
Yeah, and look, we would really acknowledge, I mean, our work so far with of course, the Air Force and now the Navy. The New Zealand Defence Force is really taking a leading role in rethinking how we make these careers open and accessible and appealing to a diverse range of young people. But also, I think, really understanding the unique things about careers in Navy and careers in Air Force and that broader defense sector that you can leverage to really make these exciting. These are week-long residential camp programs. And I mean, the growth, whether or not there's an offer of service that comes out of this, the growth that we see in the young women that take part is absolutely outstanding. And I would really applaud everybody involved across NZDF and of course, Squadron Leader Magdalenos for the work in sort of driving this forward and making it happen. So there's great work being done in this space already within defense, building the future operators of the information domain. And we're really, really proud to play a role in that. Let's take a little bit of a look. I guess this is about giving you some context. What do we do as a business when we talk about trying to challenge the way people learn? How do we do that? Look, for us, a lot of our work right at the beginning, we started this business in 2016, started with Nano Girl, a science superhero who's learning her superpowers by studying STEM. And it all started on the live theatrical stage. This has now been exported in 5 different languages, 8 different countries around the world. This is what it looks like. The person with the fire extinguisher strapped to her back is Michelle, sitting next to me, blasting across the stage on a skateboard. The man, if Gareth Baston, his character name was Boris on the left of that image. Actually, I think we're covering him up with our little picture-in-picture, but if you could see his face, he looks justifiably terrified. Blasting toilet roll. This is the Full House at the Civic, I think, or the St. James in Wellington. This is a foyer of a live theatre, and that is queue upon queue upon queue, up and down the foyer of young people waiting to say hi and get a selfie with the scientist. So this is fundamentally challenging young people's perceptions of science and technology and engineering, and whether challenging the idea, their belief as to whether or not a career in that space is something that they can take part in. As you'll appreciate, with the emergence of COVID-19 in the last 6 months, and the inability to travel or gather in groups of more than 10 or 0 in level 4, having a business that had a large live theatre product was suboptimal. So we took our business online and launched an online superhero training program for young people, where you can subscribe, log into a platform, and learn your science superpowers based right here in Nano Girl's lab. 134 countries, more than 350,000 have taken part in that in the 6 months since we launched at nanogirlslab.com. Really, really exciting, and I'm sorry we're covering her eye. So this image is speaking to we're developing artificially intelligent digital learning companions that help people explore the world of science and technology. And imagine if you could have a real life, emotionally intelligent, interactive conversation with the characters that you loved as a young person or the world's greatest educators. That's what we're building. On the right of this image is a real life character from our stage show. She plays the role of Claire, our constantly learning, artificially intelligent repository. And on the left is a first look at one of our Soul Machines, artificially intelligent digital human learning companions. And so we're really trying to use technology to challenge the way that people learn technical subjects to start with, but any subject long term.
So we do things in different ways. It's easy if tech is your natural thing. We have somebody in your house who is into tech, because we know the evidence shows that you're more likely as a child to get into tech if one of your parents is in tech or your grandparents. If that's not the case, we release something called the Kitchen Science Cookbook, which is designed for people who know how to cook but might not think they are scientists. And what we want to do is make sure that everybody has a relationship with science and technology, and we try and give you a platform that actually speaks to you. And so for those who like recipes and cooking, this was for them. And this was pretty fun, and it ended up being turned into not only a best-selling book, but also it's free on Hey if your kids want to watch it. Over lockdown, I was able to make the TV show I'd always wanted to make. Lockdown was great for breaking all of the rules, and so made a high school science TV show where we taught fundamental subjects that actually are quite dry in school, and we brought real scientists from around New Zealand to explain them. And I think that changing world of learning remotely is really going to open up possibilities for how we teach. We teach all sorts of things at all sorts of ages. We work with kids getting robots into schools, training the teachers, because our average primary school teacher is a 55-year-old female. When you say, let's teach robotics, they go, no way. And so we try and bring methods in to actually build their confidence so that they can do that too. And during lockdown, look, we do a lot of digital stuff, but you may have seen there's a huge digital divide in New Zealand and across the world. So we make sure that our platforms are accessible for all, including a partnership with Eat My Lunch, where we put science activities and tech activities into the Eat My Lunch and free boxes of food that would last the families a week, and they could do that while they were locked down.
It's worth just talking about that for a second longer, I think. So, you know, I think, like if you're here as part of this conference, you have some sort of involvement in the information domain, either as a supplier, someone working in technology and developing next-gen technologies and capabilities, or on the defense side, working out how to apply those technologies to, you know, to keep New Zealand safe. This for us was a real exercise in design thinking and thinking differently. You know, as we were driving ahead, engaging young people by the thousand online, we understand that in order to make sure that that future workforce is diverse and capable, we have to bridge that digital divide. Now, we lobby government and we push as hard as we can to try and change that. These are free food parcels going to 6,000 families every week across largely South Auckland, but other areas of New Zealand where there is significant disadvantage as well. This was designing science experiments and science learning programs that you could complete at home using only the packaging of the food items in that box. So not everything that we look at is high tech. And I think if we're going to solve this problem collectively across the information domain, we need to be prepared to look beyond the sort of the flashy and the emerging tech, as much as that has a role, and really understand where the problems lie and how we can solve them.
And so we don't just work in New Zealand, we work offshore too, and we do this for people from all sorts of demographics. This is our work at the Fiji STEM camp. This is working with girls who live in squatter settlements. They have access to no running water, no electricity, and yet we were able to get them to come on our camp and learn about practical hands-on science and engineering skills that meant that they could rewire their solar panel on top of their tin shack, which I think is really important.
So the Wonder Project, look, if you have young people in school in New Zealand, in your family, you may well be aware of the Wonder Project and the Rocket League. This is Engineering New Zealand's outreach program where they're working in schools, connecting engineering professionals into the school environment. Look, incredibly proud of an enduring partnership with Engineering New Zealand. They're a wonderful team, and to have helped them concept and create the Wonder Project. So this is an example of working in partnership, and we'll talk about that a little more as we go through. I'm in the shot, so shall I talk about this one? Very flattering.
I love this. We get to do some fun projects.
Some nutty projects. Look, this is the piece of work that you're seeing. If it looks like we've taken a student, put her in a goalpost in front of a target and are firing tennis balls at her at high speed using one of those things you get to practice returning fast serves, that's exactly what you are seeing. This is a project we did for Auckland Transport. They challenged us to help them think from an education design perspective. How do you encourage young people to drive safely? So addressing the issues of speed, of alcohol or impairment while driving, and distraction while driving. And look, we've all seen the ads and the gory ways of explaining that. This was an on-stage live game show pilot that we ran, where we were measuring the pulse response and the behavioral response, scientific data projected on screen next to the stage while we exposed people to increasingly fast situations, talking about the adrenaline response. Why does it feel amazing to go fast, but why should you why is it also dangerous and should happen in a controlled environment? So really, we do get to do some crazy stuff. I like our business. It's good.
Why do we do what we do? Look, the research is really clear that children, especially girls, make up their mind about science and technology by the age of 12. That typically is much younger than people invest in. Usually very little science is done in primary schools. And so by not building that foundation young, we actually can really lose them in high school, just because high school science is a bit dry sometimes and it's easy to lose people in.
Yeah, look, I mean, absolutely right. And one of the things that when you look at a lot of the interventions that we've just walked through, our work within Defence, School to Skies, School to Seas, the Auckland Transport Project, are working in sort of the later years of high school. But many of the things that we design and create, and certainly a lot of our consumer products that we work with, aim at under 12-year-olds. And this is why it's really clearly supported by research that if we don't solve the problem then the things that we build as we sort of mature and move further through the age group, they're not going to fix the issue. And fundamentally, it's because we have a leaky pipeline issue. And so, we need to work from one end to the other of that pipeline to try and resolve the problem. And I guess, look, we put this graphic together. If you think about this pipe that you can see on the wall here as being a young person's progression through formal education and on into a career, we can break it up into, we're covering, give me half a second. I'm just going to move, Michelle and I. If only it were this simple normally.
Ooh,
look at that. We're going to go down here for a minute. You're right? You're not dizzy? Mm-hmm. Good. Primary, secondary, tertiary, and on into the workplace. Our work tends to focus in this sort of primary through to the latter years of secondary education. And we spend some time then supporting our partners in developing their workplaces to be, I guess, ready to receive that sort of diverse pool of talent as it emerges if things are successful. The pink bars here, just in those last year of secondary, first little bit of tertiary education, and just right at the end of tertiary education before people enter the workplace, are where you tend to see companies with a dependence on technically capable workers investing their time to try and drive recruitment programs, set the hook, encourage people to work. It's a relatively easy space. You're looking at a 1 to 2 year investment before you see an offer of service, an offer of employment, maybe then coming into your grad program. The reality is, as if we're going to solve the future challenges of the information domain and make sure that we have security of resource moving forward, and as diverse a group of people as possible coming through, genuinely representative of New Zealand in all ways, we need to have the courage to go back and start early in primary education and take a very long view of this strategy. And really, that's where we come in. That's very much our focus. So, I mean, this is not all of the partners that we engage with by any stretch, but you can see a huge range of organizations committed to either dependent on a technical workforce or really committed to helping to improve the equity of access to education in New Zealand, across the Pacific, and recently for us around the world with the likes of Tata and TCS. Now, there are some amazing organizations there. Those organizations would not be able to justify a long tail investment, a really long-term view of a theory of change without an ability to really understand and measure impact. And so if you're involved in these programs, if you're considering taking this journey as a technical employer, understanding how you measure your impact is so important. And I'm absolutely not the best person to speak to this. I defer to the knowledge in the room. Do you want to walk through a little bit of our sort of framework and how that
happens? So measuring impact, I think, is really important. As an ex-academic, I like this research side of things. So we've been measuring a lot of things. And I think it's really important. I was just on a call before this conference where a potential partner said, oh, we send all these curriculum packs to schools. And so we measure success on the number of packs we send out. And I said, how many schools use the packs? And they said, oh, we don't know. And I said, well, if mailing is your impact, that's great, you've measured that. But how do you know if the curriculum packs are working? And they said, well, we know they've gone to the schools. And so it was very clear to me that actually, if you want to measure impact, you've got to be really clear on what the impact is you want to make. And then you've got to be able to measure that metric. So we measure a whole bunch of stuff here, and some really exciting stuff. We do theatre shows. We can measure in the theatre show not only how many people attended, but whether or not the theatre show changed their perception, what the gender diversity was. We work with teachers. We can get a lot of data about that. But this is fine. This is the easy stuff. I'm interested in the more difficult things. So the work we did in Fiji, the language skills of the students we were working with was probably not high enough for us to do a written survey. So we asked them to draw a picture of a scientist. Before they met us, draw a picture of a scientist. And most of them drew this really nondescript scientist. Typically they were a man. And this scientist just wants to know, what is science about? Very nondescript.
I'm going to move us again because we are blocking the scientist's feet, Michelle. And
then we did a week's camp where they got to be scientists. They got to do a whole bunch of experiments, and we asked them the same question: can you draw a picture of a scientist? And every time they drew themselves, they saw themselves as scientists. They named specific experiments, reagents, things that they were doing, and so the shift became very clear in that. If you can see yourself being these things, if you can put these labels towards yourself, you're much more likely to go into those careers. And so we measure those in different ways, and sometimes we get kids to draw stuff. This is another one. This is a 7-year-old. And before she thought scientists had nice handbags and saw rainbows, afterwards she actually drew a picture of herself and doing a science experiment on a bench. So really lovely data. And it's been really interesting because obviously we've had COVID coming around, and so we've been measuring across New Zealand. We asked students, what do scientists do for a job? We've been asking this for about 6 years. I have data across New Zealand on what they think the answer is. we kept asking this question after lockdown, and we've been able to show that actually our kids are really picking up the information around them. So before COVID, we would ask what scientists did for a job. This was primary school students, and they would say experiments, science, do a volcano, study. Since lockdown, so this data is about 6 weeks old, kids now use words which are highly technical. Medicine, vaccinations, virus, cures. The only thing that has changed is they've been at home, they have had the TV on, their parents may have been talking about viruses, and suddenly what they think a scientist does for a job is very clear to them based on the influence around them. And I think that's a really positive sign about how if we can talk about our trades, if we can talk about what we do in technology and have it conversationally around the dining table, it can really have a positive impact on the words that our kids use.
Massively. And so look at whether you are an employer dependent on a sort of technically capable workforce, or developing programs to support that, or investing in programs to support that, we would really encourage you to focus hard on the theory of change and making sure that there is a robust theory of change that underpins whatever's been done, and really being clear in the impact that you're working to achieve, how you're measuring that impact, as much as anything to be able to make sure that your program design responds if you're not achieving the impact that you set out to achieve. So we have PhD researchers full-time working on this project here at Nanogirl Labs. They have our theory of change from you take part in a Nanogirl program as a 9, 10, 11-year-old or 15, 16-year-old taking part in something like School to Skies. We can follow through the theory of change at each milestone underpinned by peer-reviewed research in the education space, how we're performing and whether or not we believe we have a good chance of achieving the changes that we set out to achieve, that everyone everywhere having a meaningful relationship with STEM. So I fundamentally making sure that measurement is in place is so critical. The last thing I'd say before we, I guess, move to a bit of a discussion and a chance to take some questions would be the importance of collaboration in this space. And to show, when we put together the screen with our various partners in preparation for this event, it was actually a little bit of a shock when you look back and you think, just in a relatively short space of time, how many organizations we've worked with to try and solve these problems. And everyone on that screen, we continue to have an enduring relationship with them, and we're incredibly proud of that. One of the fundamental things here is the importance of collaborating and stepping in and being constructive in a space, to solve a problem for New Zealand Inc. This is not about every company needing a tech workforce, developing a new program for, we're going to send our people into schools and they're going to talk about the work they do and it'll be brilliant and it'll solve the problem. Your schools need another visitor from another company like a stag needs a hat rack. This is about coordinated, collaborative behavior, really lining things up in the best interest of New Zealand and in the best interest of long-term New Zealand's young people and our technical workforce, and of course the information domain. Anything to that? No? So look, that's a bit of a snapshot of, I guess, what we do at Nanogirl Labs and why we do it, and hopefully how that can inform and support the development of the information domain. Team, we would be so happy to take any questions, to engage in any discussion. I know this platform does a brilliant job of it, so over to you, facilitation team.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle and Joe. So let's kick it off with what have you not been able to do that was in your plan as a result of COVID-19?
Everything.
Yeah, wow. So look, as COVID-19 this year, in fact, right now, we would be, I think we were going to be touring through Saudi at this point, had things gone to plan. Having been at the Edinburgh Festival for a month, toured the south of England, toured the States and Australia, but this was going to be a live eventing international growth year for us. In the week before COVID, $2.5 million worth of partnerships just disappeared out of our calendar because no one could do any of the work anymore. That was a challenge. But you know what? It forced us to do something that we should have done a year earlier, and that was to take the business take that side of our business, the consumer facing, like where we own our own brands and engage people on our own brands and stories online. The reach has gone wild. I think we've got the slide up, but it's 100 and some countries all over the world. It's thousands of kids engaging in it. The reach is, we'll still do live when we're allowed, but actually we've been able to achieve an awful lot more as a result of a good kick up the backside by COVID. Hey, it would have many easier ways to have learned that lesson, but we'll take it. We're doing all right.
Awesome. So I've decided that talking about pivoting is a bit boring now. So I'm reckoning the fast people are pirouetting. So what would you like to do next in your next pirouette? Now we have this new arrangement, mindful of the fact that we've got large numbers of decision makers, corporates, tech companies, government people listening to us today. So what would you like to do next, and what can you do to help?
I'll let you talk about what we're doing next. I think the crucial thing to talk about, whether you call it pivoting or pirouetting, the reason why we at Nanogirl Labs could move so quickly is because we're both nerds. And however many years of tinkering and playing and coding, like my first website I made about my pet rabbit, and I coded in HTML.
It's just last week. Beautiful.
But those things that you do when you're just tinkering with tech as youth actually was one of the biggest reasons why we, as a live performance company, could in 3 days build a whole digital platform, know how to code the back end, know how to tweak the front end, do it all through the night by ourselves. And so I think sometimes the skills that we have, we don't always acknowledge, and how important it is in this post-COVID world.
Yeah, look, what have we got coming up next? I'm personally particularly fascinated about the role of AI and the emergence of the sort of those digital human learning companions that I shared. I just think that, we've seen examples in the last decade with the likes of Khan Academy, of that kind of inverted classroom model of learning, where you kind of get the concepts down at home yourself, and then you put them into practice in the classroom with the teacher, rather than being sort of chalk and talk in the classroom and then doing your homework exercises at home. I think there's an opportunity to take a real leap beyond that. And I'm really enjoying that R&D. Look, also, I think really fundamentally challenging what learning looks like, what it means to be able to learn skills quickly and participate in skills quickly. And work, a great pleasure for us is working with partners to do that. So when you ask how you can help, if this is an area where you identify a future risk to your business, if it's an area that you'd like to explore contributing, we'd be so up for a conversation about how we can do that with both some creativity and some fun, but also some really robust academic underpinnings.
So we've got 6 weeks between now and part 2 of IDEAS 2020. So if you're game, I reckon we should see if we can find some of our companies who are going to come and exhibit in part 2 to see whether they can do a combo with you, so that they can show how that technology that they've got that's going to help in the info domain could also be helping in your space as well. So challenge out there to everybody who's listening in. Why would you want to do one of these projects? So
yeah. Absolutely. How exciting. We're well up for it. I'll put our contact details up and by all means reach out. We'll be really excited. Look, if I can lay down one other challenge, Michelle talked during the sort of the slide deck piece of this about that digital divide piece. And I literally just submitted the final draft on a book that I've been writing with David Downs about the silver linings of COVID and the way that organizations responded to COVID. And one of the things that struck me talking to educators about the response to COVID and the impact that COVID had on schools. And I think particularly about Pete, the principal at Manarewa High School, the digital divide. Look, we have one of the most incredible broadband infrastructures available in New Zealand. It's remarkable work. We have a great system there. We have a huge digital divide challenge in New Zealand. And I think if there's something that I think we should collectively be leaning in to solve, as well as thinking about the bleeding edge of educational transformation, kind of our space, I think it's to be really thinking about how we solve that and make sure that this is for everybody, and that there is genuine equity of access to these opportunities.
So one of the things I did during lockdown that made me feel like I was doing something useful was supporting your Nano Girls program. So can you tell people a little bit about what they can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, Nano Girls Lab, nanogirlslab.com, not to be confused with the company name Nano Girl Labs. We are rebranding the company. We're going to remove the confusion, but Nano Girls Lab with the S in the middle is our online superhero training program for young people. So you can jump in there and sign up, and your kids will do incredible activities that the team designed. Have you got any of them under the table? No, they all happens here. And if you could see the mess by my knees, you'd understand why I asked if there's something under the table. No. Look, those are programs that are designed to use ingredients and equipment that you already have lying around the house, bits of cardboard, or like plastic bottles, things like that. Michelle will go find something while I fill you in. And it's all about getting hands-on, at home, learning these STEM skills and kind of taking a step ahead in terms of STEM education. And we engage parents in that journey, right? So we provide, look, not every parent is a science and tech expert. So for every experiment, there's a parent cheat sheet, a set of notes that help you be the expert at the dinner table to really have those conversations. So I mean, here's an example, right? This is a star projector. Tell us about it, Doctor.
So the goal of Nano Girls Lab is it's lockdown material friendly, so it's stuff you have lying around the house. So this is a bit of cereal box card, an elastic band, and a paper or card that we've rolled into a cone shape. And this is actually a star projector to teach your kids about constellations. So what you do is you trace a constellation onto another piece of card. This is Matariki. And then this little bracket here that you have built actually fits onto your device, your tablet or your phone, and then the elastic band holds it in place. And then you basically have a star projector that you've made. You turn the torch on, you put your star over the top, you shine it on the wall, and then you've got your star projection on the wall. And it's how you learn all the constellations. Pretty much sums up all 50 experiments, which is what can you make from card that teaches you all about science?
And so that's the program, right? It's a really exciting program, and it's getting traction the world over. We are a socially conscious business. We build social impact and a real drive to create equity of access into every single thing that we produce, whether it's a co-designed program with a corporate partner or with defense, whether it's our kitchen science cookbook, whether it's Nano Girls Lab. So for every subscription that we sell to Nano Girls Lab, we enable a family somewhere who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to take part, access to the program, and people could also donate those access opportunities without buying it for themselves. Just go on the website, hit donate, and say, I'd like to give you enough to get 4 families connected up to this. But we had a massive response to that. It's what enabled us to fund things like the Eat My Lunch partnership, bridging the digital divide. It also, we've got work with Manaya Kalani. We've got access with, charities all over New Zealand. I'm trying to think off the top of my head of some of the most amazing partners.
Big Sisters, Pillars.
Yeah, Pillars, Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
We're in this really unique position, I think, and I'm not sure it's a privilege, but it's definitely insightful. One of the things we say is if you can't afford our program, don't worry, just fill in this form and we'll gift it to you. And we don't ask you questions about why you can't afford it. We just say, hey, we think this is for everyone. So if you can afford it, please pay for it. If you can't, we'll gift it to you. And the gifting that we've done, most people fill in their details and there's a little notes box at the bottom where they write us a note, and some of the stories of what's going on in people's lives right now, especially in this second lockdown, we've got some really heartbreaking stories of how people are finding it really, really tough. And these are not the stories that we're hearing in the media. These are just parents, proud parents who have found themselves in situations of job loss, house loss, just trying to do the best for their kids. And so we get to see the best and sometimes the worst of what's going on.
And there's obviously a role for government in resolving some of those things, and we've seen a response, a policy-based response there. Our work is all about finding those, being really creative about the value exchange, so that by enabling a family who can afford something to buy something that they want that adds value in their life, we can function as a business. Like we can, there's a commercial aspect to that, of course, but also we can make a difference in other people's lives. And so, say for instance, I take the BNZ as an example of a corporate partner, or Toyota New Zealand. One of the challenges that we know companies are having is that we're still working from home extensively around New Zealand. is that when your family's at home and the children are at home, being able to focus and get work done on the computer can be really challenging. So one of our activities can give you 1 to 2 hours of quality focus time, and parents love that. And it's smart time, tinkering time, learning time, not zombie screen time, which parents love. So our corporate partners were buying that and giving it to their staff and enabling their staff to have access to the program. That's several thousand subscriptions in the case of those large employers, which we're then able to gift the same number again out to those who wouldn't otherwise be able to have access, or to invest in programs that have the same impact but cross the digital divide. So I think there's an opportunity for us to think a bit differently about how business functions, and to really make a difference. And again, from the book, one of the things I'm seeing is a real shift to come towards companies, by consumers, towards companies that are thinking that way and thinking about the impact that they have in the world.